What a perfect day to gather and celebrate and spend time encouraging one another. That's one of the reasons why you're here, to encourage one another on, to spur one another to holiness and to good deeds, to worship together and to delight and be impacted by the Word of God. Last week we began our series on Joseph. And basically, we wanted to accomplish two things last week. We wanted to remember a basic overview of what takes place in his story. Didn't want to catch you off with all the exciting things that are going to take place as we go through this study. And also, I wanted to drive home this very important thing. That this is true. That the events that we're reading and what takes place in the life of this person, Joseph, really did happen. And we looked at some of the archaeology and the evidences behind this story, including seeing his palace and where he was buried in that pyramid tomb and a statue of him made by people who knew him to a high standard. And so we looked at some of that last week. If you're intrigued, you're like, well, hold on, I didn't even know anything about that. You want to look on our website, and you can watch that from last week. I suggest go to the YouTube link so you can see some of the pictures and all that kind of stuff. That way you can see just see the maps and all that from last week, okay? So that was big picture overview and driving home the reality that this is a true story. Now, today we're going to begin by placing it into its context in the book of Genesis here and starting to look at the beginning things of Joseph's story and his family. Genesis is very simple to remember the flow. It goes like this. Creation, God spoke. Creation, fall, flood, Tower of Babel, chapter 11, very easy to remember, right? Creation, fall, flood, Tower of Babel, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph. That's it. That's the flow of Genesis, right? So we're at the end of, you want that one more time, right? Creation, fall, flood, Tower of Babel, chapter 11. Whoa, look at that. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph. So Joseph's story is taking place near the end of the book, actually kind of mixed up in the last 20 chapters or so. And then the Abraham story starts in chapter 12 after the story of Babel, a little bit at the end of chapter 11, but mostly at the end of beginning of chapter 12. And in chapter 12, God calls Abraham, which is Joseph's great-grandfather, confidently said, to go to this land that he will show him, and he's going to make him a great name of Abraham, and the whole world's going to be blessed through him, and he's promised this land and this place that we know of as Israel, and we find out that Jesus, the Savior of the world, is going to be born through Abraham's genetic line, and so we wait, and we hear that in Genesis chapter 12, and we wait and we anticipate what's going to happen. Ultimately, God gives Abraham's descendants the land of Israel, but it's not going to be for a long time, and God tells him that. It's not going to be for a very long time, several centuries. And so Abraham has a son named Isaac, and we find out that the promises that God has made to Abraham are going to come through the son Isaac, not Ishmael. And then Isaac has twins, Jacob and Esau, and we find out, well, technically Esau was the oldest, Esau and Jacob. And we find out, though, that the promises are going to come through Jacob and not Esau. Now these families aren't perfect, and that's one of the interesting things about the Bible, and when it's writing about what took place, it's not making everything seem all perfect. And actually, these families are incredibly messed up, and you see these sin patterns being passed down generation to generation in these families. Some very evil sin patterns, such as in these families you see incredible evil hostility amongst one another. You might see that in Abraham's, so he's got Sarah and Hagar, they're all crazy hostile, and maybe Isaac and Ishmael at a lesser extent. But then you see in Isaac's kids, Jacob and Esau, Isaac's kids, major hostility. You see fathers playing favorites. So this is my favorite kid, Esau, and that goes over well in every family. No, I mean, I'm trying to work that in my own extended family. I've been working on my mom for several decades now to try and get her to say I'm the favorite, and I know what she's thinking, but we'll keep it on the down low. She hasn't actually said it, but we're getting there. Anyway, so there's playing favorites, which is actually a really evil thing in homes and in families. And I guess I am on a bad track there. I should probably rethink my life. Done. Okay, so so we got Jacob and Esau and major hostilities, birthrights, deceiving. It gets to the point where Esau wants to murder his son Jacob. He's just waiting for, his brother Jacob, and he's just waiting for their dad to pass away. And it gets bad, and Jacob runs away. So today we're now in this next generation where we're talking about Jacob's family. And that's Joseph is his 11th born son. And we're going to see these same sin patterns in this family. And we've talked about it a little bit, but major hostility and playing favorites. When I'm going to look at his family, I'm not so much going to look at his brothers today and that hostility, although the same stuff is there. I'm going to kind of look at the dynamics between Jacob and his wife Rachel, and Jacob and his wife Leah, and the hostilities in there. Now, I try to figure out exactly what to call Leah, Joseph's aunt or stepmom. I don't know exactly how it works, but something along those lines, you get it. So we're talking about those family dynamics. And my hope for us today is to look at these unhealthy dynamics in this family that Joseph was raised in, and then the impact that some unhealthy things make in all of their lives. And I want to challenge us to maybe think through our families of origin and our participation in those families, and then think about maybe our families that we have now or we plan on having someday, and thinking about how we want to make some changes and how we want our families to go in a different direction than what we see here in Joseph's messed up family. Okay, so we're going to look at that. Joseph is born in Genesis chapter 30, but I want to back up and set the stage back into chapter 29, starting in verse 16. So I'm going to start reading there. The words are going to be on the screen. If you have your Bibles, you can use them just to make sure that I'm reading with integrity, I guess. Okay, verse 16. Starting at 16, go down to chapter 30, verse 1. It says this: Now Laban had 2 daughters. The older was named Leah, and the younger was named Rachel. Leah had ordinary eyes, but Rachel was shapely and beautiful. Jacob loved Rachel, so he answered Laban, I'll work for you 7 years for your younger daughter Rachel. Laban replied, better that I give her to you than some other man. Stay with me. So Jacob worked 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed like only a few days to him because of his love for her. We all know what that's like. Verse 21. So then Jacob said to Laban, give me my wife, for my time is completed. I want to sleep with her. Well, I should be editing this. So Laban invited all of the men to the place to a feast. That evening, Laban took his daughter Leah and gave her to Jacob, and he slept with her, and Laban gave his slave Zilpah to his daughter Leah as her slave. When morning came, there was Leah. Oops. So he said to Laban, what? What is this you have done to me? Wasn't it for Rachel that I worked for you? Why have you deceived me? Laban answered, it is not the custom in this place to give the younger daughter in marriage before the firstborn. Complete this week of wedding celebration, and we will also give you this younger one in return for working yet another 7 years for me. And Jacob did just that. He finished the week of celebration, and Laban gave him his daughter Rachel as his wife, and Laban gave his slave Bilhah to his daughter Rachel as her slave. Jacob slept, Jacob, I don't know, got to know Rachel, and also, and indeed, he loved Rachel more than Leah, and he worked for Laban another 7 years. Now, when Yahweh, capital L, capital O, capital R, capital D, when the Lord saw that Leah was unloved, he opened her womb. But Rachel was unable to conceive. Leah conceived, gave birth to a son, and named him Reuben, for she said, "The Lord has seen my affliction. Surely my husband will love me now." She conceived again, gave birth to a son, and said, "The Lord heard that I am unloved, and has given me this son also." So she named him Simeon. She conceived again, gave birth to a son, and said, "At last my husband will become attached to me, because I have borne 3 sons for him." Therefore, he was named Levi. And she conceived again, gave birth to a son, and said, "This time I will praise the Lord." Therefore, she named him Judah. Then Leah stopped having children. When Rachel saw that she was not bearing Jacob any children, she envied her sister. "Give me sons or I will die," she said to Jacob. Now, this is a mess. There is a lot of pain going on in this family. You just keep getting glimpses of these pain statements and these hurt statements. Later you see Rachel says, "I have wrestled with my sister and won." And later still Leah will say, "This time my husband will honor me because I have borne 6 sons to him." And then finally we read in Genesis chapter 30 verse 22, after all this back and forth, it says, "Then God remembered Rachel, and he listened to her and opened her womb. She conceived and bore a son and said, 'God has taken away my shame.' She named him Joseph. May the Lord add another son to me." That finally, there's Joseph born, the 11th in this family, the first of Rachel. There is so much extraordinary pain in this story, especially seen with Leah, but all the way through this story. And it all came down to one simple question: do you feel loved? Leah, do you feel loved? And her answer is no. Not by my husband. In fact, nobody apparently wanted to marry her, and so her father had to trick Joseph into marrying her, and he didn't love her, and he wasn't interested in her, and he was stuck. He ended up married to this person that he didn't want to be married to. He never wanted to be married to her at any point. He was tricked and trapped into it. He wasn't attracted to her, and he just didn't want to be married to her. And to Jacob, I say, tough beans, bro. Or Paul would say it this way, a little bit more mature than I would. He'd say, "Jacob, love your wife." That's what Paul would say. Jacob, but I didn't want to be, I don't want to be, no, Jacob, love your wife. It's just as Christ loved the church. He gave himself up for her. We're commanded to love not just the wife we want, but love the wife that you have. When Paul writes these words in Ephesians 5, he is not interested in the excuses that people are going to make on why they don't want to love their spouse anymore, why they don't want to do that. He's completely not interested in hearing your reasons. He's not interested in Jacob's reasons. And Jacob has so many reasons. The command here is entirely clear: to love them. To love them. But what if I'm not attracted? What if they were mean to me? What if they're not loving me? Well, it doesn't matter. The command is clear. Love your wife. And Jacob's decision here, and that's what it is. It's a decision. And Jacob's decision here to not love his wife Leah, when he decides to not love his wife Leah, it is brutally painful for her, but also it's tragically destructive for the entirety of his home and his family. Everyone feels it. You look at Joseph's family, and we're going to be doing that. I'm going to make three simple instructions or comments, hopefully to give you some direction so that you can hear these warnings and make different choices in your homes, make different choices in your families and your future families. The first thing that we need to observe here is everyone desires to feel loved. Even the Leahs, especially the Leahs. Everyone desires to feel loved. Everyone desires to feel loved by the people in their family. Everyone desires to feel loved by all the people in their family. Rightly loved, loved in a holy, unselfish, uplifting, cherished, pure sort of way. But everyone desires to be loved. Every husband desires to feel loved from his wife. Every wife desires to feel loved from her husband. Every son wants to feel loved from his father. Every son wants to feel loved by his mother. Every daughter wants to feel loved by her father. And every daughter wants to feel loved by her mother. And more so, all the siblings want to feel loved by all the siblings. Not just one brother or one sister, but all of them. Everyone wants to feel loved by all the people in their family. Now, those who claim they don't, they're speaking from a place of deep wounds. And because there are deep wounds in our family situations. Because maybe they're not loved well, or they were loved wrongly, and now they despise the thought of being loved. But that's because of wounds. And I think you can see with the comments that Leah makes over the years and over these 6 children, that she goes from, now my husband will love me, to saying things like, well, now I'm going to celebrate God, Yahweh. And her thoughts and hopes of being loved by her own husband seem to go down as she makes these comments going through her story. Now, when I wrote this message, I actually changed the point to everyone wants to be loved by, everyone has a desire to be loved, to everyone desires to feel loved. And I made that distinction because there's a big difference between the statements like, I know my Father loves me, and I feel incredibly loved by my Father. That's very different. Or I know my mother loves me, even though she doesn't say it or anything like that. No, I feel my mother loves me. She gives me hugs all the time. It's kind of embarrassing, but she hugs me all the time, and she's proud of me, and she just exudes happiness when I walk in the door. I mean, that's feeling loved as opposed to just knowing it. One of the generational family evils in our culture and our society is an unhealthy reservedness in the home, in communicating clearly, in communicating your heart's affection for your children. It's being recaptured. But I know that many of us haven't grown up in those environments, and so we need to set a new direction for our future generations in our home. And we need to say, no, that's not going to be my family of the future. I also say this idea of feeling loved because people feel loved in different ways, and I know this isn't in the Bible, but it's helpful to carry out the instructions of the Bible. The Bible commands us to love one another. We see in Gary Chapman's book, 5 Love Languages, that people feel loved in different ways. They feel loved by words of affirmation, or receiving gifts, or acts of service, and physical touch, and quality time. And the premise is that people have 1 or 2 of these, probably 2 of these, that really make them feel extra loved, and the rest they enjoy just fine. But 2 of them make them really feel loved. And usually in your family, in your home, you're going to be wanting to love people in the way that you feel most loved, and you're going to project. But the other people in your home may feel loved differently. And so we need to be intentional, is the premise, about figuring out how people feel loved and love them in that way, even if it's less natural and a little bit more intentional. So let's say somebody loves gifts. They love gifts, they love receiving gifts, but their husband loves giving compliments. Okay? So husband walks in the door and says, wow, you are the most incredible human being in the entirety of the planet. I can't even imagine that I spent the last few hours at work and you were here, and I'm a wow. You know, I don't know. Words of affirmation. I'm just kind of making this up on the spot. I don't know. You probably know what that's like. But the wife's like, I remember that time you brought me home a Toblerone. I don't know. That's a bad example. But guys, I try. But anyways, if you want to love someone, don't ask, how do I want to feel loved? How do they feel loved? That's the question. How do they feel loved? And how do they want to feel loved by me? As a husband, I want to love my wife well. And so I want to figure out, how does she most feel loved? Is it by words of affirmation, or is it by me helping? And helping around the house and helping continually every day. What is it that makes her feel most loved, so that she can feel that? And I don't just say, once you figure out what their love language is, that's the thing you need to bombard them with for them to feel loved. Day after day after day. And if it's acts of service, well, then you come home, and when you see them, then you engage. You're not done yet. You're not done yet for your day. You're out to love your spouse, or whatever the case may be. On the other hand, the wounds come in when we get the opposite of what we want. And so let's say you're a words of affirmation person, and you get bombarded with criticism. That's extra painful. Or you're a quality time person, and you're ignored. Or your spouse works long hours. It's extra painful. Everyone desires to feel loved. And we're commissioned to go out and love one another. And so it's not just the case in marriage, it's also true in your families. What about your father? How does your father feel most loved? What about your mother? What are ways that she feels most loved by you? Is it gifts? Don't show up without flowers. Is it touch? To hug them. Yeah, seriously. Walk in the door and bless them. How do your parents feel most loved? If you're a son or a daughter, or maybe an adult daughter, or a teenager or a teenage son, you can have a powerful impact on your family by figuring out how the people in your family feel loved, and everyone's different, and then choosing and engaging to loving them in that way. So I'm a words of affirmation person and a touch person. So if you're a teenager of mine, just walk in the door and say, "Dad, you're amazing." And I'll be like, "I love you too." Yeah, it's easy that way. I'm way cheaper than like gifts or acts of service. It's just so easy that way. But figure out all the people in your family. If you have kids, this is what I did. When my kids were younger a couple years ago, I made this chart. I was like, I'm going to figure out how my kids most feel loved. So I made this chart, and I was like, okay, and I made all these lists of ways that I could try and love my kids in areas of, gifts and quality time. And I just kind of went through them all, and I just made notes then on how they responded each time. And you know what? All my kids weren't the same. I couldn't just lump them all together. And this kid liked these things a lot more, and this kid liked these things more. I think they all like surprise ice cream. So that might be an extra, a sixth love language for kids. However, but this idea of figuring out your family, it's to cultivate love. Joseph was loved by his father, but Jacob didn't care about loving the rest of his kids. You do not have that same luxury as a man or woman of God. You don't get to do that. You get the joy of loving and loving and loving the people in your family, your family that you were raised in, but also the family that your future family or your current family, whether it's your spouse or whether it's your kids. Now, I say all that because there's issues. And we don't want to be like Jacob. And we don't want to be like Jacob who doesn't do a good job of making his wife Leah feel loved or 10 of his sons feel loved. As far as is up to you, I encourage you to be blameless in this area. Be aggressive in this area.
Don't just roll with it and go with this, I assume they know, and they know that I know. No, this is where you want to lean in and be godly and aggressive. You know, if you've got sisters or brothers, I encourage you to be aggressive at showing love to your brothers and your sisters. Every one of them. Every one of them, not just your favorites. Again, that's evil and that's hard. I'll tell you right now, it was much easier for me to show love to my sister, who was 6 years younger than me, than to my brother, who was 16 months younger, and it still is to this day. It's hard. It's hard to do, but as far as it's up to you, seek to be blameless in this area in your home. There's a sin issue that was passed down in Jacob's family. If you've got adult children, I just encourage you to re-engage. You're like, I didn't do a good job as a parent. Say, dive in. Make sure they feel loved. You need to go out and tell them and find out how they feel loved and continue that work. You're still their parent. And if you're like, they know, I don't need to tell them, that is the heart thought of a weenie. I hope that's not you. So I just threw that out there. Love bold, love clear, guys. Love bold, love clear, okay? None of this, I love them. Okay, all right, enough said. All right, so that's number one, and that was a fun one. Number two is this. Oh, it's so cheery. Everyone experiences disappointment with love. Man, I am so glad I came to church this morning. People love us less than we want to be loved. Example, Leah. Or they love us worse than we want them to love us. I'd bet Joseph would rather be loved better by his 10 brothers, but he doesn't get to experience that. Now, also to be fair, we also are guilty of not loving the people in our lives as much as they want to be loved, as well as they deserve to be loved. Okay, so let's walk forward with humility here. In the context of a wife loving her husband or being loved by her husband like Leah, or a husband being loved by her wife like, say, Hosea, we have these hopes and we have these dreams for our relationships. Marriages. Sometimes there's disappointments. There's disappointments in not feeling as loved as much as you hope, or even feeling loved as much at all. Kids can feel disappointed by their parents, by how they're loved or not loved by their parents. And parents can feel disappointed by their kids, especially as they grow up, and how they get less and less interested in communicating how much that the kids love the parents. And I guess I want to say I'm sorry if you're in one of those situations and realities where you're just not feeling loved well, or you haven't felt loved well for a long time. I know that it's painful stuff. I know it's painful stuff. And I think it's important that I say that there are times when you might need to distance yourself from a relationship, from a father, or from a mother, or from a spouse, maybe because of danger, because of abuse, or brokenness in their life and its impact on you, and I get that. I'm talking today about things that are generally true, a general ambition, a general directions and pointers, but in some majorly unhealthy situations, and maybe there's something like that going on in your life, I encourage you to be safe, to stay safe, and if it's in your marriage, to get help, If there's brokenness there in them, stay safe, get help, and if you need guidance, I would love to give you some guidance and give you some feedback. Adam here is on staff. He would love to help you and give you some guidance in this area. We really care about your marriages and your relationships and the challenges. It does not surprise me that marriage is challenging, because that's one of the things that reflects the image of God. And the enemy loves to destroy it, especially in Christians. So we want to help. We want to encourage you. All right, so everyone experiences disappointments. You can see that in Joseph's family and the violence there. and you see the favoritism and all that kind of stuff, favorite kids, favorite siblings, that's dark stuff. Anyway, so that's number 2. But number three is this. Everyone has a choice. Be determined to love. Everyone has a choice. Be determined to love. Now that's much easier said than done. Very often the road to loving your family well is down the path of forgiveness. Forgiveness. And we're going to talk a lot about forgiveness when Joseph faces that moment in his life where he has to decide to forgive his family or to treat them as they deserve to be treated. Friends, though, for us and as the people of Jesus, we have been forgiven everything, and so we forgive everything. We've received forgiveness from Jesus, and so we forgive all the people in our lives and the people in our families. And some of you know you need to forgive the people in your families or some people in your family for not loving you well or not loving you appropriately or not loving you in a godly manner or ignoring you or whatever the case may be. Maybe a father, maybe a mother, maybe a brother or a sister. Maybe it's your wife or your husband or your son or your daughter. Maybe you're finding it hard to forgive them. But you need to. You need to, and I'm just going to remind you again and again, forgiving someone is not saying that what they did to you is okay. That's very important. When you forgive someone, you're not saying, okay, that was okay. No, that was not okay. That was evil and wicked and vile and horrible and all kinds of things. You're not saying that it's okay. What you're saying is, I'm going to choose to not treat you as you deserve to be treated. I forgive you. That's the gospel. God's not going to treat us as we deserve to be treated. Instead, he's going to forgive us. He's not saying the evil that we've done is okay at all. He's saying that I'm going to treat you differently than you deserve. I'm going to forgive you. Everyone has a choice. You follow the way of Jesus and be determined to forgive the people in your life. Now, if you're married and you're feeling like you're not being loved well, or maybe you're feeling like you're not being loved at all, I understand that stuff hurts. I get it. That stuff hurts, and it's easy to find yourself all alone in your pain and in your hurt. And I just want to encourage you to hang in there. To keep going, to keep forgiving, and choose to be determined to keep loving, even if they're not loving you well. And I understand, again, I throw back in that caveats about safety and abuse and things like that. If your specific situation, if you need guidance or direction or help or whatever, again, talk to Adam or myself, and we want to encourage you and help you with your specific situation. We want you to get help. You see, when we're young, like me, when we're young, we feel like and we believe love needs to be fair. And if it's not fair, well, then walk away from it. That's what we believe. That if I'm going to love someone, then they need to love me back at least the same. And if they don't love me back the same, well, then that's not fair. But sadly, that's not love. Maybe that's what we want, but that's not marriage love. If your marriage is struggling, you find yourself with only one direction of love going on this way, it's okay to get help. It's okay to get help. It's okay to get encouragement. If you're in an unfair situation, let me remind you and encourage you with what always encourages me. I love looking at old people and how they loved. Kelly's grandfather, Everett Jensen. I love his story, and I get to see this also with her other grandfather right now. But after decades and decades of marriage,
Violet, her name was Violet Mae Jensen. After Violet Mae Jensen, she started to lose her memories. And she started being unable to help around the house. And so after years and years, she had to move into a home. And every day he would have to go visit. He would choose to go visit her. To choose to go visit this woman who forgot their times together, forgot the stories, forgot their relationship, and all that kind of stuff. And year after year, he would visit her. And what I love about that situation is how he loved her when it was unfair. It was all one way. It was all one way. You know, she couldn't love him as he deserved to be loved. And you know, sometimes we have to live the life we have, not the one we want. And he was in that situation for years and years and years, faithfully loving. It wasn't like just for a season, for years. Sometimes we just all we can choose is what kind of man or woman we're going to be. And I encourage you to be one who is steadfast in their love and loyalty, no matter what. No matter what. We all have choice. We all have a choice. And Kelly's grandfather chose to dig in and be determined to love his wife. Sometimes it's to love your children, to love your spouse, to love your parents, even when it's not easy or it's not wonderful. In the case of Everett, you know, after years of loyal love, after years of being dedicated to his wife, he just had that special privilege to be there after years of Alzheimer's, after years of all that stuff, to be there at his wife's bedside, holding her hand as she took her last breath. And that's loyal love. And I know that there's thousands and thousands of stories like that. Tens of thousands of stories like that. Friends, I encourage you, that's who you want to be. You want to be that one who knows how to love like that to the end, even when it's not fair, even when it's not loyal. That's inspiring. And I hope as you live in a broken world with broken families and areas of disappointments, that you can lift your eyes up off of the moment and catch a vision for the you that you're called to be in whatever relationships and whatever in your family. You know, the kind of love you want to give your family, even if it's not fair. The Bible talks a lot about love, and you know what? It doesn't say love is easy and love is fair. It says love is patient and love is kind. It says love is not selfish. It says it doesn't keep a record of wrong. That's what it says about love. My final thought on Joseph's family: for all those painful years that Leah experiences, for all those times in her marriage and those struggles, and just the year after year, it seems like her story does have some redemption to it. She is the one. Her sister passes away early, and she lives as Jacob's wife for a long time, and gets to be buried in the family tomb with Jacob. But also, it is through Leah. It is through Leah and her son that Jesus comes. It's through Leah's line, through the unloved one's line, that the Savior of the world comes. And I just love that. If you find yourself in a hurting place, the first thing you need to know is Jesus. You need to know Jesus, the Savior of the world, the one who is close to the brokenhearted, the one who loves you with a steadfast, loyal love. You need to know Jesus, the one who loves the unloved, the one who loves you with a wonderful, wonderful love. And we encourage you, if you've not given your life to Jesus, to give your life to Jesus today. To give your life to Jesus and be saved. 3 challenges for us. Number 1, map out the love languages of all the individuals in your family or families. If you have your own family, then map that out. You're in your family of origin. Map it out. You're like, how do I do that? Well, you can ask them, and that's easier. Or you can try and figure it out, which is fun.
Number 2, I want you to make a plan to love them in that way intentionally before the 31st of January. Now, this is going to be really hard for my brother. He lives in California, and I got lots of figuring out to do here. But try and between now and the 31st, figure out how they love to be loved. Hope that it's physical touch. You can give them a hug and call it good, or something like that. No, yeah, and figure that out. And number 3, if you feel like you need help and you want to talk to someone about your marriage or family situation, you can speak to Adam, and he can direct you towards some possible help. Adam will be available.
Hello, and thank you for watching our service here at Rehope. My name's Adam, and I'm on the pastoral care team. So, every Sunday, we invite people in the congregation to come up and receive some prayer ministry, and we want to actually extend that offer out to you guys who are watching. So if you ever want to come and receive prayer ministry from us, just send us an email. If you get in touch with Hannah, who is our pastoral admin, her email address is hannah@rehope.co.uk. Okay, thank you very much, and God bless.